The ice speaks in whispers before it screams. Captain Frank Worsley stands at the bridge of the Endurance, watching the morning mist rise from the Weddell Sea like ghostly fingers. December 7, 1914. 2 days since they left South Georgia. 2 days since they crossed the threshold from civilization into the vast white unknown. The pack ice stretches endlessly ahead. Broken plates of frozen ocean drift like scattered puzzle pieces, each one capable of crushing a ship's hull like an eggshell. But Worsley has navigated these waters before. His weathered hands grip the wheel with confidence, born of 20 years at sea. Skipper. The voice belongs to Thomas Audie Lees, the expedition's motor expert and stores officer. His thin face carries the pallor of perpetual seasickness. Sir, Ernest requests your presence in his cabin. Worsley nods without taking his eyes off the water. Between the ice floes, leads of dark water beckon like highways through a maze. Choose correctly and they'll reach Vosel Bay within days. Choose wrong, and they'll be trapped until spring. Take the wheel, he tells his second officer, Tom Crean. The Irishman's massive frame moves with surprising grace as he assumes command. Crean survived Captain Scott's Terra Nova expedition. He knows the Antarctic's moods better than most. Ernest Shackleton's cabin occupies the stern of the ship, its windows facing back toward the world they've left behind. The boss sits at his desk, charts spread before him like battle plans. At 40, Shackleton carries himself with the confidence of a man who has stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. Twice he's led expeditions into Antarctica. Twice he's returned when lesser men might have perished. Frank. Shackleton looks up, his piercing blue eyes meeting Worsley's. What do you make of the ice conditions ahead? Dense pack, but navigable. Worsley replies. The leads are opening nicely with the current. I'd estimate another 3 days to reach Vosel Bay if the weather holds. Shackleton traces a finger across the chart, following their intended route. Red pins mark supply depots that should be waiting for them on the Ross Ice Shelf, 2,000 miles away on the far side of the continent. Those depots represent life itself for the transcontinental party that will attempt the crossing. And if it doesn't hold? Worsley considers the question. Outside the cabin windows, the morning sun catches fragments of ice like scattered diamonds, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Then we wait for better conditions. The ship can handle it, boss. Endurance was built for this work. The vessel's name reflects Shackleton's family motto, "By endurance we conquer." Constructed in Norway specifically for polar exploration, her reinforced hull can withstand pressures that would splinter ordinary ships. But even the strongest vessel has limits. How are the men? Shackleton asks. Eager, nervous, ready for whatever comes. Both men know the stakes. This expedition represents the last great prize in Antarctic exploration. With the South Pole conquered by Roald Amundsen in 1911, only one challenge remains: the first crossing of the entire continent. Success will cement Shackleton's legacy as the greatest polar explorer of his generation. A knock interrupts their conversation. Frank Wild enters without ceremony, carrying a steaming mug of tea. Shackleton's second-in-command possesses the lean build and weathered features of a career explorer. Wild has followed Shackleton through hell before, most recently on the Nimrod expedition that came within 97 miles of the South Pole. Morning briefing in 10 minutes, Wild announces. The scientific staff wants to review their objectives before we make landfall. The expedition carries 6 scientists whose work will justify the massive expense of the venture. Dr. James Wordie will study the continent's geological secrets. Robert Clark will catalogue its marine life. Leonard Hussey will monitor weather patterns that might predict future climate changes. Their discoveries could prove as valuable as any geographical achievement. And our photographer, Frank Hurley's already on deck with his cameras, Wild reports. Claims the morning light is perfect for dramatic shots. Hurley represents a new breed of expedition member, part scientist, part artist, part showman. His photographs and films will document their journey for a world hungry for adventure. In an age where moving pictures capture the public imagination, Hurley's work could transform polar exploration into popular entertainment. The men gather in the ship's mess hall, cramped quarters made cozy by the proximity of human warmth. 28 souls comprise the Weddell Sea Party, each selected for specific skills essential to their mission. They range in age from 18-year-old stowaway Persis Blackborough to 57-year-old Chippy McNish, the ship's carpenter whose expertise might mean the difference between life and death in the frozen wilderness. Shackleton addresses them with the easy authority of a born leader. His voice carries the lilting accent of his Irish childhood, softened by years of English education and refined by countless lectures to geographical societies. Gentlemen, we stand at the threshold of history. Within days we'll establish our base camp on the shores of the Weddell Sea. From there, 6 of us will begin the greatest journey in polar exploration, 2,000 miles across the heart of Antarctica to the Ross Sea. The men listen in respectful silence. Some, like Wilde and Crean, have followed Shackleton through previous expeditions. Others, like young Blackborough, hear these words with the wonder of first-time adventurers. All understand the magnitude of what they're attempting. Our success depends on teamwork, discipline, and unwavering commitment to our common goal. Every man aboard this ship has been chosen for his unique contribution to our mission. There are no passengers here, only essential crew members whose efforts will determine our fate. Dr. Alexander Macklin, one of the expedition's 2 surgeons, raises his hand. At 24, Macklin combines medical training with the enthusiasm of youth. His presence ensures that illness or injury won't automatically doom the expedition. What's our contingency plan if ice conditions prevent us from reaching Vauxhall Bay? It's a reasonable question. The Weddell Sea's reputation for treacherous ice conditions is well established. Previous expeditions have been trapped for months, their crews forced to endure Antarctic winters in unimaginable isolation. We establish our base wherever circumstances permit, Shackleton replies. The transcontinental crossing can begin from any point along the coastline. Our ultimate destination remains unchanged. Outside the mess hall, the ship's engines throb with steady rhythm. Chief Engineer Lewis Rickinson maintains the coal-fired steam plant that provides their only means of progress through the pack ice. Without power, Endurance would become a prisoner of wind and current, drifting helplessly wherever the ice chooses to carry her. The morning briefing concludes with assignments for the day ahead. Scientists prepare their equipment for immediate deployment upon landing. Sailors check rigging and ensure the ship remains ready for any emergency. Everyone understands that preparation now might prevent catastrophe later. As the men disperse, Worsley returns to the bridge. The ice conditions have changed subtly during their meeting. What appeared as navigable leads now shows signs of compression, the floes moving together with ominous purpose. The wind has shifted from northwest to northeast, driving the pack against the distant coastline. Trouble? Crean asks, noting the captain's expression. Possibly. The ice is closing faster than expected. They watch in fascination and growing concern as massive ice floes collide with grinding force. Pressure ridges form where the edges meet, creating barriers 30 feet high that no ship could possibly cross. The very forces that create this spectacular display could easily trap their vessel in an icy prison. Should we turn back? Young Blackborough asks. The Welsh teenager secured his position aboard ship through determination and audacity, stowing away in Buenos Aires when his initial application was rejected. Now he stands at the bow, watching their route to safety slowly disappear. Not yet, Worsley decides. The leads remain navigable for now, though their window of opportunity grows narrower with each passing hour. We push forward while we can. The boss didn't come this far to turn round at the first sign of difficulty. The Endurance threads her way between towering ice walls, a reinforced bow pushing aside smaller floes with grinding impacts that shake the entire vessel. In the engine room, Rickenson monitors steam pressure and coal consumption, knowing that mechanical failure now would be catastrophic. The nearest repair facility lies thousands of miles away across an ocean that claims ships with casual indifference. Photographer Frank Hurley works frantically to capture the dramatic scenery surrounding them. His heavy glass plates record images that few human beings have ever witnessed. Cathedral-sized icebergs carved by wind and current into impossible sculptures, pressure ridges that resemble frozen mountain ranges, and the ethereal beauty of Antarctic light reflecting from countless crystal surfaces. "This is what we came for," Hurley murmurs, adjusting his camera for another shot. "This is the image that will make the world understand what we've accomplished. But accomplishment requires completion, and completion grows more uncertain. With each mile they travel deeper into the pack ice. By afternoon, the leads begin to narrow dangerously. Ice floes that showed promising gaps in the morning now press together with increasing force. The wind carries sounds that every polar explorer learns to fear. The grinding shriek of ice under pressure, the deep groaning of the pack as it shifts and settles, the occasional explosive crack that signals the birth of new pressure ridges. "We need to find shelter for the night," Worsley tells Shackleton. "A protected area where we can ride out any pressure changes." They locate a temporary haven in the lee of a massive iceberg, its towering bulk providing shelter from wind and current. But safety remains relative in this environment. The same iceberg that protects them could easily crush their ship if it chooses to roll or split apart. As darkness falls over the Weddell Sea, the temperature plummets. The ship's heating system struggles against the Antarctic cold, while ice begins forming on rigging and deck surfaces. Thick frost coats the windows, requiring constant scraping to maintain visibility. The men gather for dinner in the mess hall, their conversations subdued by awareness of their increasingly precarious situation. Outside, the pack ice continues its relentless compression, driven by forces beyond human comprehension or control. They have entered a realm where natural laws govern absolutely, where human emission means nothing to wind and ice and freezing darkness. "How long do we wait?" Wilde asks quietly. Shackleton stares out at the frozen landscape beyond the windows. Somewhere ahead lies their intended destination, the shores of Weddell Bay, where they plan to establish their base camp. Behind them, the route to open water grows more uncertain with each passing hour. "We push forward at first light," he decides. "Every day we delay makes our crossing more difficult. The sun won't wait for us to build courage. But courage alone cannot overcome the fundamental forces of nature. And nature, in the form of the Weddell Sea pack ice, has already begun to demonstrate its absolute authority over human ambition. The temperature drops to 20 degrees below zero during the night. Ice forms on the ship's hull with alarming speed, adding weight and reducing maneuverability. Worse, the pack continues its compression, eliminating the leads that had offered passage just hours before. Morning brings devastating clarity. Where open water had beckoned the previous day, solid ice now stretches to the horizon. The Endurance floats in a pool barely larger than herself, surrounded by barriers that would challenge the most powerful icebreaker ever built. "We're beset," Worsley announces, using the technical term that strikes fear into every polar explorer's heart. Beset means trapped. Beset means they must wait for the ice to release them or risk having their ship crushed by forces beyond imagination. The realization settles over the crew like a physical weight. Their grand expedition, planned for years and funded with enormous expense, has been reduced to a simple equation: survival versus surrender to the most hostile environment on Earth. January 18th, 1915. The Endurance becomes prisoner of the Weddell Sea pack ice, held fast in the embrace of forces that care nothing for human ambition or scientific achievement. 28 men face the reality that their ship, their lifeline to civilization, now rests at the mercy of wind and current, and the slow, inexorable movement of ice that could either free them or destroy them utterly. The greatest survival story in human history has begun. Ernest Shackleton stands at the bow of his trapped vessel, watching the ice close around them with the patience of geological time. Behind him, 27 men await his decision. Ahead lies the unknown duration of their imprisonment and the terrible tests that will determine who among them possesses the strength to endure whatever the Antarctic chooses to inflict. The ice speaks in whispers before it screams, and in the growing pressure around the Endurance, those whispers have begun to carry the promise of a sound that will test human courage to its absolute limits. The adventure that was meant to crown Ernest Shackleton's career as the greatest polar explorer of his generation has become something else entirely. A fight for survival against odds that would challenge the strongest men ever born. And in the frozen wilderness of the Weddell Sea, with civilization thousands of miles away, that fight has only just begun. The morning sun reveals the full scope of their predicament. Ice stretches unbroken to every horizon, a white desert of pressure ridges and frozen chaos. The leads that had offered passage yesterday have vanished as completely as if they never existed. The Endurance sits locked in place, her hull groaning softly as the ice shifts around her. Shackleton calls another meeting. This time, the atmosphere in the mess hall carries weight that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. The men understand they've crossed a threshold from which there may be no return. "Gentlemen, our situation has changed," Shackleton begins, his voice carrying the calm authority that has made him legendary among polar explorers. "We are now guests of the Weddell Sea pack ice. How long that hospitality lasts remains to be seen." Chippy McNish, the expedition's carpenter, shifts uncomfortably in his seat. At 57, he's seen enough of life to recognize when circumstances turn deadly serious. His weathered hands, scarred by decades of working with wood and steel, tap nervously on the table. "What are our options, boss?" Wilde asks. "We adapt," Shackleton replies simply. "The transcontinental crossing is postponed, not abandoned. Our new mission is to preserve ship and crew until conditions allow us to continue our original plan." Dr. Macklin raises his hand. "How long might we be trapped?" It's the question every man wants answered and fears to hear. Shackleton considers his response carefully. False optimism could prove as dangerous as despair. Previous expeditions have been beset for periods ranging from weeks to months. Wilhelm Filchner's Deutschland was trapped in this same area for 6 months before breaking free. We must prepare for similar duration. The implications sink in slowly. 6 months means enduring the Antarctic winter in conditions that test human endurance to its limits. 6 months means rationing food and fuel while maintaining morale among men who signed on for adventure, not survival. "The ship is strong," Worsley interjects, trying to inject confidence into the discussion. "Endurance was built specifically for ice work. Her hull can withstand tremendous pressure." But even as he speaks, they can hear the ice working around them. Pressure ridges form and collapse with sounds like distant thunder. The pack moves with geological patience but unstoppable force, reshaping the landscape hour by hour. Frank Hurley seizes the opportunity for documentation. His cameras capture the eerie beauty of their ice prison, towering seracs that dwarf the ship, pressure ridges sculpted by wind into impossible architecture, and the play of Antarctic light across crystalline surfaces that sparkle like scattered jewels. "This is unprecedented," Hurley murmurs, adjusting his heavy equipment. "No photographer has ever documented a major expedition being trapped in pack ice. These images will be historic. Historic, perhaps, but only if they survive to share them with the world." The days that follow establish a new routine aboard the Endurance. With forward progress impossible, Shackleton reorganizes the expedition around their current reality. Scientists adapt their research to studying the pack ice itself. Sailors maintain the ship against the constant threat of mechanical failure. Everyone contributes to the essential task of preserving their floating island of civilization. The ship's heating system becomes critically important as temperatures plummet. Chief Engineer Rickinson monitors coal consumption with the attention of a miser counting gold. Every shovelful burned brings them closer to the moment when they must choose between warmth and mobility. "We're using too much fuel," Rickinson reports privately to Shackleton. "At current consumption rates, we'll exhaust our supply long before spring." It's a death sentence delivered in technical terms. Without fuel for the engines, the Endurance becomes little more than an elaborate shelter. Without power for the heating system, that shelter becomes a tomb. "Reduce heating to minimal levels," Shackleton decides. "Issue extra clothing and blankets. We conserve fuel until we absolutely need it for escape." The temperature inside the ship drops noticeably. Men bundle themselves in multiple layers of wool and fur, their breath creating clouds of vapor even in the supposedly heated cabins. The mess hall becomes the social center where body heat provides marginal warmth and human contact fights off the psychological effects of isolation. Leonard Hussey, the expedition's meteorologist, provides daily weather reports that grow increasingly ominous. The barometric pressure suggests major storms approaching from the south. Wind patterns indicate the pack ice will continue compressing for the foreseeable future. Temperature readings predict the onset of the Antarctic winter with its months of perpetual darkness. "The storm systems are intensifying," Hussey reports during the morning briefing. "We should prepare for severe weather within 48 hours. Severe weather in Antarctica transcends ordinary human understanding. Wind speeds can exceed 100 miles per hour, driving snow with the force of sandblasting equipment. Temperatures drop to levels that freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Visibility disappears entirely, creating a white void where direction becomes meaningless. The storm arrives ahead of schedule, with the fury of an Antarctic blizzard. Wind howls through the ship's rigging like tortured souls, while snow drives horizontally across the deck in stinging sheets. The Endurance shudders under each gust, her masts bending with alarming flexibility. Inside the ship, the men huddle together for warmth and comfort. The heating system struggles against the cold, infiltrating through every gap in the hull. Ice forms on the interior walls despite their best efforts to maintain temperature. Sleeping becomes a test of endurance as frozen condensation drips from the ceiling onto their bunks. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," mutters Tom Crean in his thick Irish accent. "I've been through some weather, but this is biblical." The blizzard lasts 3 days and nights. When it finally passes, the landscape around them has been completely transformed. Snow drifts bury the lower portions of pressure ridges, creating an alien topography of white dunes and crystalline sculptures. The ship itself sits deeper in the ice, her hull now locked in a frozen embrace that seems even more permanent. But the storm has also revealed something unexpected. Through his telescope, Worsley spots dark water on the distant horizon, a lid that might offer escape if they could somehow reach it. 2 miles, he estimates. Maybe 3 at the outside. 2 miles might as well be 200. The intervening ice shows pressure ridges 30 feet high, crevasses that could swallow a man without trace, and surfaces too unstable to support human weight. Still, the sight of open water provides psychological relief after days of seeing nothing but endless frozen wasteland. "Could we drag the lifeboats across the ice?" Wilde asks, studying the terrain through binoculars. It's a desperate suggestion, born of growing desperation. The ship's 3 lifeboats represent their ultimate means of escape, but transporting them across such treacherous terrain would require superhuman effort. Each boat weighs over a ton when fully loaded with essential supplies. "Not with this crew," McNish observes pragmatically. "Half these lads have never worked a day outside an office. They'd collapse before we made half a mile." The carpenter's assessment stings because it contains too much truth. Several expedition members were chosen for scientific expertise rather than physical capability. Dr. Reginald James, the expedition physicist, possesses brilliant intellectual gifts but limited experience with manual labor. Thomas Order-Lees brings mechanical knowledge but lacks the robust constitution needed for hauling boats across broken ice. Yet, even as they debate options, the distant lead begins to close. Ice floes drift together with inexorable patience, eliminating their potential escape route hour by hour. By evening, dark water has vanished entirely, replaced by solid ice that stretches unbroken to the horizon. We wait, Shackleton decides. The ice brought us here. The ice will carry us out. We must have faith in forces beyond our control. Faith becomes increasingly difficult as February passes into March, with no improvement in their situation. The Endurance drifts slowly northward, with the pack ice, but the movement brings them no closer to open water. If anything, they seem to be moving deeper into the heart of the frozen wasteland. The ship's position, carefully calculated each day by Worsley using celestial navigation, tells a story of gradual displacement toward the northwest. They've traveled over 200 miles from their original position, but that movement represents drift rather than progress toward freedom. March brings the first real test of crew discipline. Food rationing becomes necessary as their situation extends beyond all original estimates. Shackleton reduces daily rations by 20%, a decision that generates grumbling among men accustomed to hearty meals. "We signed on for exploration, not starvation," complains one of the sailors during what he thinks is a private conversation. Word of dissatisfaction reaches Shackleton quickly aboard a ship where privacy remains impossible. He addresses the issue directly during the next morning briefing, his voice carrying quiet authority that demands attention. "Every man aboard this ship volunteered for an expedition into unknown territory. Unknown means exactly that. We cannot predict what challenges we'll face or how long they'll last. Our current situation tests our resolve, but it doesn't change our fundamental mission." He pauses, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "Any man who wishes to abandon that mission is free to leave the ship immediately. I'll provide him with a sledge, a week's rations, and directions to the nearest civilization. Buenos Aires lies approximately 1,200 miles northeast across some of the most hostile terrain on Earth." The sarcasm achieves its intended effect. No one volunteers for solo travel across the Antarctic ice cap. The grumbling subsides as men recognize their complete dependence on collective effort and shared resources. But Shackleton knows that morale represents their most fragile resource. Men can endure physical hardship if they maintain hope and purpose. Take away those psychological supports, and even the strongest individuals can collapse into despair that dooms everyone around them. He implements a program of organized activities designed to maintain mental health during their enforced imprisonment. Scientific work continues with adapted objectives. Leonard Hussey organizes evening entertainment featuring music and storytelling. Frank Hurley teaches photography classes using equipment and techniques that fascinate men accustomed to simpler technology. Most importantly, Shackleton establishes the principle that every man contributes according to his abilities. Scientists take turns standing watch and maintaining equipment. Sailors assist with research projects that expand their understanding of the environment around them. Everyone participates in the essential work of preserving their community against forces that could destroy it. The Antarctic winter approaches with astronomical certainty. Each day brings marginally less sunlight as Earth's axial tilt carries the southern hemisphere away from solar warmth. By May, they'll experience perpetual darkness, broken only by brief periods of twilight. That darkness will last for 4 months, testing human psychology in ways few people have ever experienced. "We need to prepare mentally for the long night," Dr. Macklin advises Shackleton. Isolation and darkness can trigger depression, paranoia, and worse. Some men may not survive psychologically even if we maintain physical health. Shackleton nods gravely. He's read accounts of Arctic expeditions where crew members suffered complete mental breakdowns during the polar night. Strong men have been reduced to gibbering madness by months of darkness and confinement. Others have committed suicide rather than endure the psychological torture of endless night. What do you recommend? Routine, purpose, hope. Men need reasons to get up each morning, even when morning looks identical to midnight. They need to believe their efforts matter, and that survival is possible. As if responding to their conversation, The ice around the Endurance shifts with a grinding roar that shakes the entire ship. Pressure ridges collapse and reform while new crevasses open with explosive cracks. The pack ice demonstrates its power with casual displays that dwarf human engineering. Outside the cabin windows, the landscape reshapes itself according to forces that operate on geological timescales. What appears solid and permanent can change within hours. What seems navigable can become impassable before a man can walk its length. The ice is beautiful and terrible, Shackleton murmurs, watching pressure ridges rise like frozen mountain ranges. It gives life and takes it with equal indifference. We're witnessing forces that have shaped this continent for millions of years. But witnessing and surviving represent different challenges entirely. The Endurance and her crew exist as temporary visitors in a realm that acknowledges no human authority. Their survival depends on adapting to conditions that could change without warning, becoming something far worse than their current predicament. The greatest test of human endurance in recorded history continues with each passing day, as 28 men face the reality that their fate rests entirely in the hands of ice, wind, and the slowly turning seasons of the most hostile environment on Earth. The Antarctic winter arrives like a slow closing coffin lid. May 1st, 1915. The sun disappears below the horizon for what will be the last time in 4 months. 28 men watch from the deck of the Endurance as their world transforms into something alien and hostile. The temperature drops to 30 below zero. The pack ice groans and shifts around them with sounds that seem almost alive. "Lads," Ernest Shackleton announces, his breath creating clouds of vapor in the frigid air. "Welcome to the long night. 4 months of darkness stretch ahead. 4 months when the human soul fights against despair while the body struggles against cold that can kill in minutes. 4 months when the thin veneer of civilization must hold against pressures that have broken stronger men than these." Frank Wild organizes the crew into watches that maintain essential functions around the clock. Without the sun's rhythm to guide them, artificial routine becomes their anchor to sanity. Men rise at predetermined hours, eat meals by lantern light, and perform duties that give structure to days indistinguishable from endless night. The ship's heating system fails completely on May 8. Chief Engineer Lewis Rickinson delivers the news with the grim precision of a military report. "The boilers crack beyond repair. We're burning our last reserves of coal just to prevent the engine from freezing solid." The temperature inside the ship plummets immediately. Ice forms on cabin walls within hours. Water freezes in cups before men can drink it. Sleeping becomes an ordeal that requires multiple layers of clothing and shared body heat for survival. "We move everyone into the mess hall," Shackleton decides. "Communal quarters will conserve what little heat we can generate from oil lamps and cooking fires." 28 men crowd into space designed for half that number. Privacy vanishes entirely as survival trumps comfort. They sleep in shifts, sharing blankets and huddling together like survivors of a shipwreck, which, in essence, they are. Dr. Alexander Macklin treats the first cases of frostbite on May 15th. Able seaman William Bakewell loses feeling in 3 fingers after removing his gloves to repair a broken lantern. The digits turn white, then blue, then black, as circulation fails. "Hold still," Macklin instructs, warming the affected fingers against his own body. "The feeling will return, but it's going to hurt." Bakewell grits his teeth as sensation floods back with excruciating intensity. The pain brings tears to his eyes, but tears that freeze before they can fall. "Better to hurt than feel nothing," Macklin observes. Nothing means amputation. The word hangs in the frigid air like a death sentence. Without proper medical facilities, amputation could easily lead to infection and death. Every minor injury now carries the potential for catastrophe. Frank Hurley continues documenting their ordeal with obsessive dedication. His cameras capture images that no human beings have ever seen. The interior of a ship slowly being consumed by ice, men huddled around flickering oil lamps like medieval monks. The ethereal beauty of Aurora Australis, dancing across skies, black as eternity. These photographs will tell our story, Hurley explains to anyone who questions the wisdom of wasting precious lamp oil on photography. If we don't survive, they'll be our legacy. If we do survive, they'll prove what we endured. His glass plates accumulate in carefully protected storage, each one a frozen moment in their descent into an experience that tests the limits of human endurance. 550 plates document every aspect of their gradually deteriorating situation. The ice around the Endurance shifts constantly, creating pressure ridges that tower 40 feet above the ship's deck. The vessel groans under stress as frozen walls press against her hull with increasing force. Built for ice work, she resists pressures that would crush an ordinary ship, but even her reinforced construction has limits. "She's singing," observes Tom Crean during his watch duty. The Irishman's massive frame seems impervious to cold, that leaves other men shivering uncontrollably. "Listen to her timbers. They're talking to the ice." The ship does seem almost alive, creaking and moaning as she adjusts to forces beyond human comprehension. Her hull flexes like a living thing, wood and steel adapting to pressures that operate on geological scales. But adaptation has its limits, and those limits grow more apparent each day. Shipping McNish examines the hull regularly, his experienced carpenter's eye detecting changes invisible to untrained observers. Seams open slightly under pressure, allowing freezing air to infiltrate the ship's interior. Support beams bend beyond their design tolerances. The very structure that protects them shows signs of gradual failure. "How long can she hold?" Shackleton asks during one of their private consultations. McNish considers the question with the gravity it deserves. "Hard to say, boss. She's strong, but the ice never stops pushing. Every day brings more pressure. Something's got to give eventually." Something gives on July. The morning begins like any other, in their world of perpetual darkness. Men wake in shifts, consume meager breakfasts heated over oil flames, and begin another day of maintenance and survival. Then the ice around them shifts with a grinding roar that shakes the entire ship. Pressure ridges collapse and reform within minutes. New crevasses split the frozen surface with explosive cracks that echo like artillery fire. The Endurance lifts bodily as ice beneath her keel heaves upward with irresistible force. "All hands on deck," Shackleton shouts, though the order seems almost meaningless. Where can they go? The ship represents their only shelter for hundreds of miles in every direction. They watch in fascination and terror as their frozen prison reshapes itself according to forces that dwarf human engineering. Ice flows the size of city blocks collide and override each other, creating new topography within hours. The landscape they've grown accustomed to disappears, replaced by alien formations that seem to mock their tiny human presence. When the upheaval ends, the Endurance sits higher in the ice, but surrounded by barriers that make escape even more impossible. Pressure ridges now tower 50 feet above their deck, blocking any view of the horizon. They've become prisoners in a canyon of ice that could close upon them without warning. "We're deeper in the pack than ever," Frank Worsley reports after taking their position with sextant and chronometer. "The drift is carrying us northwest, but we're moving away from open water, not toward it." The news hits crew morale like a physical blow. After months of hoping for gradual movement toward freedom, they now find themselves traveling deeper into the heart of the frozen wasteland. Their situation has become worse, not better. Shackleton recognizes the danger immediately. Despair kills faster than cold in this environment. Men who lose hope lose the will to perform essential tasks. Without constant effort to maintain equipment and preserve resources, they'll die regardless of rescue possibilities. "Gentlemen," he addresses the assembled crew, "our situation has evolved. We're now participants in one of the most remarkable journeys in polar exploration history. No human beings have ever experienced what we're experiencing. We're writing a new chapter in the story of human endurance." Leonard Hussey supports the commander's psychological strategy, by organizing entertainment that distracts from their deteriorating circumstances. His banjo provides music for evening sing-alongs that maintain community spirit. James McElroy, the expedition's second surgeon, contributes medical knowledge that becomes vital for treating injuries and illness under impossible conditions. The dogs prove both blessing and curse during the long darkness. 69 animals require feeding when human rations grow scarce. They consume seal meat that could sustain the crew, but they also provide companionship and psychological support that may be equally valuable. The dogs remind us we're not alone, observes Robert Clark, the expedition biologist. They represent life and loyalty in a place that seems designed to extinguish both. But loyalty cannot overcome the mathematical realities of survival. Food runs short despite careful rationing. Seal hunting becomes essential, though seals remain scarce during winter months. The men face the grim possibility of choosing between feeding themselves and feeding animals that provide comfort but consume precious resources. The decision comes in August when their position becomes desperate. "We can't feed both dogs and men through the winter," Wild reports privately to Shackleton. "The mathematics are simple. Every pound of meat we give to animals is a pound taken from human mouths. It's a choice that would challenge Solomon. The dogs have become companions, sources of warmth and affection in a world devoid of both. Some men have formed emotional bonds with specific animals that represent their only connection to life beyond mere survival. We keep the strongest teams," Shackleton decides. 20 dogs for sledging work when we finally escape. The rest, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. The executions take place on August 15th. 29 dogs die quietly, efficiently, mercifully. Their meat provides protein that sustains human life, but the psychological cost proves enormous. Men weep openly, as animals they've loved disappear forever. Percy's Blackborough, the young Welsh stowaway, cannot eat the dog meat despite his hunger. "They trusted us," he whispers. "They loved us, and we killed them. They died so we could live," Shackleton replies gently. "That's not betrayal, that's sacrifice in its purest form. But pure sacrifice carries its own psychological burdens. The men struggle with guilt that accompanies survival decisions no civilized society should require. They've crossed moral boundaries that peacetime ethics would condemn, yet those same decisions may preserve lives that would otherwise be lost." September brings the first hints of returning sunlight. The sun remains below the horizon, but the sky shows subtle brightening during what passes for midday. After 4 months of absolute darkness, even this marginal illumination lifts spirits dramatically. "Spring's coming," Crean announces unnecessarily. Every man aboard feels the change in his bones. Light means warmth. Warmth means the possibility of movement. Movement means the potential for escape. But the ice shows no signs of releasing its grip on the Endurance. If anything, the ship sits more firmly locked than ever, her hull now completely encased in frozen pressure that seems permanent as bedrock. The vessel lists slightly to starboard, suggesting that ice beneath her keel has shifted or compressed. McNish inspects the hull damage with growing concern. "She's taking more stress than she was designed for," he reports. "The pressure's constant now, never letting up. Something's going to fail." The failure begins on October 24th, with sounds that haunt survivors for the rest of their lives. The ice around them shifts again, but this time the movement carries malevolent purpose. Pressure ridges collapse inward, while new forces grip the ship from below. The Endurance lifts and twists as frozen jaws tighten around her hull. Then comes the sound that every polar explorer fears most, the grinding shriek of wood splintering under irresistible pressure. "She's breaking up," someone shouts, though the words seem inadequate for the catastrophe unfolding around them. The ship that has been their home, their shelter, their only connection to civilization begins dying beneath their feet. Seams split along the hull as pressure exceeds even her reinforced construction. Freezing water pours through gaps that widen with each passing moment. The stern lifts higher as ice beneath the bow compresses, twisting the entire vessel into angles that wood and steel cannot sustain. "Abandon ship," Shackleton commands. "All hands, abandon ship immediately." 28 men scramble to collect essential supplies while their world literally falls apart around them. Sleeping bags, food, navigation instruments, medical supplies, everything necessary for survival must be moved from the dying ship to the ice outside. The temperature stands at 26 degrees below zero. Wind drives snow horizontally across the broken landscape. They're abandoning the last vestige of civilization for an ice floe that could crack beneath them at any moment. Frank Hurley makes an agonizing decision that will preserve history. Of his 550 glass plate photographs, he can save only 120. The rest must be abandoned with the ship or deliberately destroyed to prevent the temptation of returning for them. "Choose the best," Shackleton orders, "the ones that tell our story most completely." Hurley selects plates with hands that shake from cold and emotion. Each discarded image represents lost history, vanished documentation of their incredible ordeal. But weight means survival, and survival trumps sentiment when death lurks in every decision. They smash the rejected plates methodically, ensuring that no one will risk their life attempting to recover them later. 430 irreplaceable photographs disappear forever, sacrificed to the mathematical demands of survival. The Endurance dies slowly, majestically, like a great wounded animal settling into eternal sleep. Her masts snap under pressure, while her hull compresses into shapes that mock her original elegant line. The ship that carried them into this frozen hell becomes another victim of forces that recognize no human achievement. On November 21st, she disappears entirely. The ice closes over the last visible traces of their vessel, swallowing her into depths that will preserve her until the end of time. 28 men stand on a drifting ice floe, surrounded by hostile wilderness that stretches beyond imagination in every direction. They have no ship, no shelter except tents that provide minimal protection against Antarctic conditions. No certainty that rescue will ever come or that anyone in the outside world even knows they exist. But they have something more valuable than equipment or shelter. They have each other, 28 men united by shared ordeal and common purpose. 28 souls who refuse to surrender to circumstances that would justify despair. "We are alive," Shackleton tells them as they stand beside their camp on the drifting ice. "We are together. We are not defeated. This ice brought us here, and this ice will carry us to safety. We will survive because survival is our only acceptable option." The wind carries his words across the frozen wasteland, where they seem to hang in the frigid air like a promise. A promise that men can endure anything if they maintain faith in each other and refuse to surrender to forces beyond their control. The greatest test of human endurance continues on a stage where the margin for error approaches zero, and the price of failure remains absolute. But 28 men face that test together, united by bonds forged in circumstances that reveal the very best of human nature under the very worst conditions imaginable. Their ship is gone. Their plans are ruined. Their situation appears hopeless by any rational assessment, but they remain unbroken. The first night on the ice tests every man's resolve. Without the ship's protection, wind cuts through their makeshift camp with surgical precision. Canvas tents provide minimal shelter against temperatures that drop to 40 below zero. Men huddle together in sleeping bags, sharing body heat while the ice beneath them groans and shifts with ominous persistence. Ocean Camp, Shackleton names their new home, with characteristic optimism. The designation transforms their desperate circumstances into something resembling exploration, rather than mere survival. Psychology matters as much as equipment when death lurks behind every decision. They establish routines that impose order on chaos. Frank Wild organizes work details that maintain essential equipment and preserve precious resources. Macklin monitors the crew's health with special attention to signs of scurvy, frostbite, and the psychological deterioration that can prove as deadly as any physical ailment. The ice floe that supports them measures roughly 300 yards in diameter, a floating island that serves as their entire world. Beyond its edges lies the Southern Ocean's frozen surface, broken by pressure ridges and crevices that could swallow men without trace. They exist on a fragment of Antarctica that drifts according to currents and winds completely beyond human control. Food becomes their most critical concern. The seal meat salvaged from the ship provides protein, but hunting opportunities remain limited during winter months. Rationing reduces each man's daily intake to levels that maintain life but leave everyone constantly hungry. Conversations increasingly focus on food, memories of meals, detailed descriptions of dishes they'll eat after rescue. "Bangers and mash," murmurs Tim McCarthy during his watch shift, "with proper gravy and a pint of bitter, and pudding after. Yorkshire pudding with treacle." Such fantasies provide psychological nourishment when physical nourishment runs short. Men sustain themselves with elaborate plans for post-rescue celebrations, detailed menus that grow more extravagant with each retelling. The human imagination becomes a refuge from physical reality too grim for constant contemplation. Perseus Blackborough, the young stowaway, shows signs of severe frostbite in his left foot. Dr. Macklin examines the injury with growing concern, as white flesh refuses to respond to warming treatments. "I can't feel anything below the ankle," Blackborough reports with forced cheerfulness. "Probably just temporary numbness from the cold." But Macklin recognizes the signs of tissue death that could require amputation. Without proper medical facilities or surgical equipment, such an operation would likely prove fatal. They face the possibility of watching a 20-year-old die slowly from gangrene while possessing neither means to save him nor mercy to end his suffering. "Keep the foot elevated and wrapped," Macklin instructs, though he knows the treatment offers limited hope. "Exercise the toes as much as possible. Don't let the muscles atrophy." Hope and medical knowledge wage war against circumstances that favor neither. They treat symptoms while praying for changes in their situation that would make proper care possible. Every day brings new evidence that their current conditions cannot sustain human life indefinitely. The psychological strain intensifies as December passes into January 1916, without improvement in their circumstances. Men who maintained optimism during the ship's gradual decline now confront the mathematical realities of survival on drifting ice. Food supplies diminish despite careful rationing. Equipment deteriorates under constant use. The ice floe itself shows signs of instability that could dump them into freezing water at any moment. Thomas Ordelise, the expedition's motor expert, suffers what appears to be a nervous breakdown during the third week of January. He becomes convinced that other crew members are stealing food from common supplies, accusations that threaten the unity essential for survival. "Someone's taking extra rations," he insists during the morning briefing. "I've been watching. I've seen the evidence." His paranoia spreads like infection among men already stressed beyond normal human limits. Accusations breed counter-accusations while suspicion poisons relationships that have sustained them through months of hardship. The community solidarity that has kept them alive begins fracturing under pressures that test every aspect of human nature. Shackleton confronts the crisis with characteristic directness. He calls a meeting where every man must speak honestly about their situation and their commitment to group survival. "We face a choice," he tells them. "We can turn on each other and guarantee our deaths, or we can unite more completely than ever before. There is no middle ground. There is no room for selfishness or suspicion. We trust each other absolutely, or we die separately." The intervention works because it addresses underlying fears that manifest as paranoid accusations. Men acknowledge their terror while reaffirming their commitment to shared survival. Ordelise apologizes for his suspicions, admitting that hunger and stress have distorted his perceptions. "I thought I was losing my mind," he confesses. "Maybe I was. Maybe we all are. Just a little." Madness represents a constant threat in their circumstances. The human psyche wasn't designed for such prolonged isolation and deprivation. They fight not only against physical death, but against psychological dissolution that could destroy their sanity before rescue becomes possible. Frank Hurley continues documenting their ordeal despite equipment limitations that make photography increasingly difficult. His remaining glass plates capture images that seem to come from another world. Men huddled around flickering oil lamps in canvas shelters, the wreckage of their ship visible through gaps in the ice, pressure ridges that tower like frozen cathedrals around their tiny camp. These photographs will be proof, Hurley explains to anyone who questions the wisdom of using precious resources on documentation. Proof that human beings can survive anything if they refuse to surrender. His dedication to recording their experience transcends mere professional obligation. The photographs represent hope that their story will survive even if they don't, that their suffering will serve some purpose beyond mere endurance. The ice beneath Ocean Camp shows increasing signs of instability as pressure from the surrounding pack intensifies. Cracks appear overnight, sometimes splitting the floe dangerously close to their tents. They move their camp repeatedly, as their small world literally breaks apart beneath them. "We need to find more stable ice," Wild reports after examining their surroundings through binoculars. "This floe won't hold together much longer." But more stable ice proves elusive in a landscape where everything moves and shifts according to forces beyond prediction or control. They've become nomads in a frozen desert, carrying their few possessions from one temporary refuge to another, as their world continues disintegrating around them. February brings a discovery that changes everything. Through gaps in the pressure ridges, Worsley spots dark water on the horizon, leads that suggest the pack ice is finally beginning to break up with the approach of Antarctic summer. The sight electrifies the crew with possibilities they haven't dared imagine for months. "Open water," Crean breathes, studying the distant leads through a telescope. Real open water, not just a temporary gap. The discovery triggers immediate planning for their escape from the drifting ice. The ship's 3 lifeboats, carefully preserved throughout their ordeal, represent their only means of reaching navigable water, but the boats weigh over a ton each when loaded with essential supplies, and the intervening ice presents obstacles that would challenge the strongest men under ideal conditions. 2 miles to open water, Worsley estimates, maybe 3 across the worst terrain I've ever seen. The route to freedom leads across pressure ridges 30 feet high, through crevasse fields where a single misstep could prove fatal, over ice surfaces too unstable to support heavy loads. They must transport not only the boats but also enough supplies to sustain 28 men during an ocean voyage of unknown duration. Shackleton studies the challenge with the tactical mind that has sustained them through months of impossible circumstances. The logistics seem overwhelming, but overwhelming has become their normal condition. They've survived everything Antarctica has inflicted on them. They can survive this final test. "We start preparing immediately," he decides. "Every man contributes according to his abilities. We modify the boats for ice travel. We select essential supplies and abandon everything else. We train for the most difficult journey any of us will ever attempt." The preparations consume 3 weeks of intensive labor. McNish adapts the lifeboats with runners that allow them to be hauled across ice like enormous sledges. Wild organizes supply lists that balance survival necessities against weight limitations. Every ounce must justify its inclusion, because every ounce will be pulled by human strength across terrain that defies description. The psychological impact of having a plan, any plan, transforms crew morale dramatically. Men who had begun showing signs of despair now throw themselves into preparation with enthusiasm, born of renewed hope. They have a goal, a destination, a purpose beyond mere endurance. But the ice has one more lesson to teach them about the futility of human plans in the face of natural forces. On April 1st, their floe cracks down the middle without warning. The split occurs during the night watch, announced by a sound like thunder that brings every man instantly awake. They emerge from their tents to find their camp divided by a crevasse 8 feet wide and growing larger as the ice continues separating. "Move the boats!" Shackleton shouts. Everything essential goes to the larger section. They work frantically in sub-zero temperatures to relocate their supplies before the gap becomes too wide to cross. The lifeboats require all available manpower to drag across ice that shifts underfoot with each step. One false move could send essential equipment into freezing water that would mean death for everyone. The larger section of ice floe measures barely 100 yards across, a postage stamp in an ocean of frozen chaos. Their world has shrunk to dimensions that emphasize their vulnerability with terrifying clarity. They exist at the mercy of forces that could eliminate them with casual indifference. "This is it," Wild observes quietly. "We can't get smaller and still survive. The next split will finish us." But the next split doesn't come immediately. Their fragment of ice drifts steadily northward, carrying them toward regions where the pack begins loosening its grip on the Southern Ocean. Each mile brings them closer to conditions that might permit escape, if they can maintain their precarious hold on life long enough to attempt it. April 8th brings the sound they've been waiting for, the grinding roar of ice floes colliding and separating as the pack finally begins its seasonal breakup. Through gaps in the pressure ridges, they see leads of dark water opening and closing, like breathing passages in a frozen lung. "The boats," Shackleton orders. "Now or never." They launch their escape attempt in conditions that would challenge experienced sailors on calm seas. 3 lifeboats, loaded with 28 men and essential supplies, venture onto water that appears black as ink against the white ice surrounding it. The temperature hovers near zero, while wind drives spray that freezes instantly on contact with skin or clothing. The James Caird, Dudley Docker, and Stancomb Wills carry the survivors of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition into waters that have claimed more ships than any other ocean on Earth. Behind them lies the ice that has been their prison and protector for 16 months. Ahead lies the unknown challenge of reaching safety across hundreds of miles of the most dangerous seas on the planet. As they pull away from the disintegrating ice floe that has been their home, Shackleton looks back at the place where they nearly died, but ultimately found the strength to survive. Ocean camp disappears behind them like a fever dream, leaving only memories and the hard-won knowledge that human beings can endure circumstances that seem designed to destroy them. "Where to now, boss?" asks Crean, manning one of the oars in the James Caird. Shackleton studies the compass while spray freezes on his beard. Somewhere ahead lies Elephant Island, a desolate rock that offers the possibility of solid ground beneath their feet. Beyond that, if they can manage it, lies South Georgia and the whaling stations that represent their only hope of rescue. "North," he replies simply. "We go north until we find land, or land finds us." The boats disappear into leads of dark water that close behind them like healing wounds. 28 men venture into an ocean that has defeated the strongest ships ever built, carrying nothing but determination and the bonds forged through shared suffering that has tested the very limits of human endurance. Their ordeal on the ice has ended. Their struggle for survival has just begun. The Southern Ocean reveals its true nature within the first hour. Waves 20 feet high rise like moving mountains around the 3 lifeboats, each one capable of crushing their fragile vessels or hurling them onto jagged ice. Wind drives spray that freezes instantly on contact, coating men and equipment with armor of ice that adds dangerous weight while reducing mobility. "Keep the boats together," Shackleton shouts from the James Caird, his voice barely audible above the howling gale. "Whatever happens, we stay together." But the ocean has other plans. Currents and wind work to separate the small flotilla, forcing each boat to fight for survival independently. The Dudley Docker, commanded by Frank Worsley, battles mountainous swells that threaten to swamp her with each passing wave. The Stancomb Wills, under nominal command of Hubert Hudson but effectively led by Tom Crean, rides dangerously low in the water her seams opening under stress that exceeds her design limits. 28 men face the most hostile waters on Earth, in boats designed for coastal work, not ocean voyaging. Their destination lies somewhere ahead in the grey waste of the Southern Ocean, if they can survive long enough to find it. The first casualty comes at dawn on April 10th. Ernest Shackleton, one of the ship's firemen, loses consciousness during the night watch. Hypothermia has invaded his core temperature despite multiple layers of clothing and shared body warmth. His breathing becomes shallow and irregular, while his skin takes on the waxy pallor that signals approaching death. He's not responding, Dr. Macklin reports, examining Holness in the cramped confines of the James Caird. Core temperature too low. We need to get him warm immediately or we'll lose him. But warming requires fuel they cannot spare, and shelter they do not possess. The boat provides minimal protection against wind and spray that penetrate every gap in their makeshift covers. They strip off their own clothing to insulate their unconscious companion, sharing body heat that they can ill afford to lose. For 6 hours, they fight to keep Holness alive while battling seas that seem determined to claim all of them. The boat rides up 20-foot waves and crashes into troughs with impacts that threaten to shatter her hull. Ice accumulates on every surface, requiring constant chipping to prevent the boat from becoming too heavy to remain afloat. Holness opens his eyes as the sun reaches its zenith, weak but conscious. "Did I miss anything important?" he asks, with characteristic British understatement. The laughter that greets his question carries equal parts relief and hysteria. They've kept one man alive through the night, but 27 others remain at risk from conditions that test human endurance beyond all reasonable limits. Frank Weddell takes charge of navigation in the Dudley Docker, using compass and dead reckoning to maintain their course toward Elephant Island. The mountainous seas make celestial observation impossible, forcing them to rely on estimates and hope while being driven by currents they cannot measure or predict. Northeast by east, he calls to the other boats during a brief lull in the weather. 60 miles to landfall if we can hold our heading. 60 miles might as well be 600 under these conditions. The boats make frustratingly slow progress against headwinds that seem determined to drive them back toward the pack ice. Each mile forward requires enormous effort from men already exhausted by months of deprivation and stress. Perseus Blackborough's condition deteriorates rapidly in the Dudley Docker. His frost-bitten foot, protected as well as possible during their time on the ice, now faces constant exposure to freezing spray and the boat's flooded bottom. The tissue death that Dr. Macklin feared becomes undeniable as gangrene spreads through the young man's extremities. "The smell," whispers Tim McCarthy, trying not to let Blackborough hear his words. "God help us, the smell of rotting flesh in these close quarters." They wrap the infected foot in canvas soaked with precious medical alcohol, the only antiseptic available in their emergency supplies. But everyone understands that such treatment merely delays the inevitable. Without surgical amputation, the gangrene will spread until it kills their youngest crew member. "Hold on, lad," Crean tells Blackborough with gruff tenderness. "We'll get you to a doctor soon enough. Just hold on a little longer." But how much longer can any of them hold on? The third day brings their first glimpse of land. Through driving snow and spray, the dark bulk of Elephant Island emerges from the grey waste like a promised salvation. But salvation reveals its own treacheries as they approach the island's coast. Perpendicular cliffs rise directly from the water, offering no landing places for boats already struggling to remain afloat. "There," Frank Worsley points toward a narrow gap in the cliff face. "A beach. I can see shingle." The landing requires navigating through surf that crashes against rocks, with the force of artillery shells. One mistake will smash their boats to splinters while drowning any survivors in water so cold it stops the heart within minutes. "Together now," Shackleton commands. "All boats at once. If we're going to die, we die trying to reach safety." They ride the waves toward shore, with the desperation of men who understand this represents their only chance. The boats surf down wave faces that seem impossibly steep, fighting to maintain control while tons of water crash around them. The James Caird grounds first, her keel scraping against stones that could punch holes in her hull. Men leap into knee-deep water so cold it feels like liquid fire, hauling their boat above the high tide line, while waves crash around them. The Dudley Docker follows moments later, her crew already bailing frantically as seawater pours through seams opened by the battering they've endured. The Stancomb Wills comes last, riding a wave that carries her completely onto the shingle beach in a grinding crash that splits her stern planking. 28 men stagger onto solid ground for the first time in 4. They collapse on the rocky beach like shipwreck survivors, which in every sense they are. Some laugh hysterically, others weep openly. A few simply lie motionless, overwhelmed by the sensation of earth that doesn't shift beneath their feet. Land, gasps Leonard Hussey, pressing his face against the stones. Solid, immovable, blessed land. But their celebration proves premature. Elephant Island offers shelter from the ocean, but it remains one of the most desolate places on Earth. No vegetation grows on its rocky slopes. No shelter exists beyond what they can construct from salvaged materials. No rescue will come to this remote outpost unless they find some way to summon help. The beach where they've landed measures barely 50 yards across, hemmed in by cliffs that make it inaccessible to anyone approaching from inland. High tide markings show that storm waves regularly wash over their refuge, making permanent habitation impossible. We need to find a better site, Wild observes, studying their surroundings through binoculars. This beach will be underwater during the next big storm. They explore the coastline in the salvaged boats, searching for a location that offers protection from weather and tides. 7 miles to the west, they discover a narrow spit of land sheltered by rocky headlands, a site that becomes their new home. Cape Wild, Shackleton names the location in honor of his second-in-command. The designation transforms another desperate situation into something resembling achievement rather than mere survival. But even Cape Wild offers only marginal improvement over their previous circumstances. The rocky ground provides no materials for shelter construction. The nearest source of fresh water lies miles away across terrain too dangerous to traverse regularly. Food remains limited to what they can hunt or gather from tidal pools that freeze solid during winter months. They construct shelters using the overturned lifeboats as roofs, building stone walls that provide minimal protection against Antarctic weather. The snuggery, as they christen their communal shelter, houses 22 men in space designed for half that number. Privacy disappears entirely as survival demands close cooperation and shared resources. Blackborough's condition becomes critical within days of their landing. The gangrene in his foot spreads despite Dr. Macklin's best efforts with limited medical supplies. The young Welshman faces amputation or death, with the surgery to be performed under conditions that would challenge the most experienced hospital staff. "We'll need to amputate below the ankle," Macklin tells Shackleton privately. "Without anesthesia except what little chloroform remains in our medical kit, and without proper surgical instruments." The operation takes place by candlelight in the snuggery, with the patient conscious throughout most of the procedure. Blackborough grips a leather strap between his teeth, while Macklin works with makeshift instruments, sterilized over an oil flame. The sound of saw cutting through bone echoes in the confined space, like the sound of their own mortality. Miraculously, the amputation succeeds. Blackborough survives both surgery and the infection risk that follows, though he'll never walk normally again. His courage during the ordeal inspires men already tested beyond normal human limits. "Bit of a close call," Blackborough jokes weakly as he recovers. "But I've still got one good foot for dancing when we get home." His optimism in the face of permanent disability exemplifies the spirit that has sustained them through months of impossible hardship. They refuse to surrender to circumstances that would justify despair, maintaining hope that sometimes seems to border on delusion. But hope alone cannot solve their fundamental problem. Rescue will not come to Elephant Island. The location lies too far from shipping lanes for accidental discovery. No search expeditions will venture into these waters during winter months. If they want salvation, they must create it themselves. Shackleton makes the decision that defines the rest of their story. "I'm taking a boat to South Georgia," he announces during a crew meeting in late April. "A small party can make better time than trying to move everyone. We'll reach the whaling stations and organize a rescue expedition." The distance to South Georgia spans 800 miles across the most dangerous waters on Earth. The Drake Passage, where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans meet, generates storms that have destroyed ships far larger than their makeshift vessel. The journey represents a desperate gamble with odds that defy rational calculation. "I'll take 5 men," Shackleton continues. "The rest will remain here under Frank Wild's command. If we don't return within 4 months, Wild will attempt to reach Deception Island in one of the remaining boats." The selection process reveals the expedition's hierarchy of skills and loyalties. Frank Worsley earns his place through navigation expertise essential for finding their destination. Tom Crean's proven reliability under extreme conditions makes him invaluable. Chippy McNish's carpentry skills could mean the difference between a seaworthy vessel and a floating coffin. Tim McCarthy and John Vincent complete the 6-man crew, chosen for physical strength and sailing experience that might prove crucial during their ocean crossing. Each man understands that the mission's success depends on their individual contributions and collective determination. They modify the James Caird for ocean voyaging using materials salvaged from the other boats. McNish raises her sides with planking torn from the Dudley Docker, creating additional freeboard that might prevent swamping in heavy seas. Canvas decking provides minimal shelter from weather that could kill exposed men within hours. "She's as ready as we can make her," McNish reports after 3 weeks of intensive work. "Not pretty, but she'll float and she'll sail. The rest depends on luck and seamanship." The departure takes place on April 24, 1916, under clearing skies that offer the first good weather they've seen in weeks. The James Caird loads with supplies calculated to sustain 6 men for 1 month, the maximum time they can reasonably expect to survive at sea. 22 men stand on the beach at Cape Wild, watching their only hope of rescue disappear into the gray expanse of the Southern Ocean. If the boat party fails, everyone dies. If they succeed, rescue becomes possible. There is no middle ground. "Take care of yourselves, lads," Shackleton calls from the boat as they pull away from shore. "We'll be back for you." Frank Wild raises his hand in farewell, knowing he may never see his commander again. The responsibility for 21 lives now rests entirely on his shoulders, with no higher authority to consult and no resources beyond what they can scrounge from their desolate island refuge. The James Caird disappears beyond the horizon, carrying 6 men into an ocean that has claimed countless victims. Behind them, 22 survivors face the prospect of indefinite isolation on one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Their survival story has reached its climactic moment. Everything now depends on human courage, seamanship, and the kind of luck that sometimes favors men desperate enough to attempt the impossible. The Southern Ocean rises to meet their challenge with waves that dwarf any they've previously encountered. Wind drives spray in horizontal sheets that freeze instantly on contact with skin or clothing. The temperature drops below 0 while visibility disappears in driving snow that makes navigation nearly impossible. For 16 days, the James Caird battles conditions that would challenge the most modern vessels. The 6 men inside fight constantly to prevent swamping, bailing water with containers that freeze to their hands while ice accumulates on every surface. They exist in a world of perpetual motion where rest becomes impossible and warmth remains a memory. Worsley performs miracles of navigation using sextant observations, taken between towering waves during brief moments when the sun appears through storm clouds. His calculations, made under impossible conditions, guide them across 800 miles of trackless ocean toward a destination that occupies less than a pinpoint on the vast chart of the Southern Ocean. On May 8th, Crean spots the unmistakable outline of South Georgia's mountains. "Land ho!" he shouts, his voice carrying jubilation that seems impossible after their ordeal. South Georgia dead ahead. But reaching land and reaching safety represent different challenges entirely. The island's coast presents an unbroken line of cliffs and glaciers that offer no landing places for their small boat. Storm conditions drive them past potential refuges, while exhaustion reduces their capacity to recognize opportunities that might exist. They spend 2 more days fighting along the coast, before finally reaching King Haakon Bay, where a narrow beach provides their first opportunity to land. The James Caird grounds on shingle with a grinding crash that marks the end of one impossible journey and the beginning of another. 6 men stagger ashore, so weakened by their ordeal that walking requires tremendous effort. They've crossed 800 miles of the world's most dangerous ocean in a boat barely 22 feet long, navigating by dead reckoning and sheer determination through weather that destroyed vessels 10 times their size. But South Georgia's inhabited whaling stations lie on the opposite coast, separated from their landing site by mountains that no human being has ever crossed. The interior remains unmapped, unexplored territory, where glaciers and peaks create barriers that seem designed to prevent passage. 36 miles, Worsley estimates, studying the forbidding landscape through binoculars, straight-line distance to Stromness Station. But nothing about this journey will be straight. 3 men will attempt the crossing: Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean. The others remain at their landing site, too weak from their ocean voyage to undertake such a demanding overland journey. Vincent and McNish especially show signs of physical breakdown that make further travel impossible. The mountain crossing begins at 2 a.m. on May 19, 1916, under clear skies that provide their first good weather in months. They climb steadily through terrain that challenges experienced mountaineers, using improvised equipment and techniques developed through necessity rather than training. 36 hours later, they hear the sound that signals their salvation: the steam whistle of the Stromness whaling station calling workers to their morning shift. It's the first human sound they've heard in over a year, proof that civilization still exists beyond their world of ice and storm and perpetual struggle. They stumble into the whaling station like apparitions from another world. Their hair and beards hang in matted tangles, their clothing, patched and repatched during months of use, barely resembles its original form. Their faces carry the marks of experiences that no comfortable life could imagine. The station manager, Thorolf Surley, stares at the 3 strangers with incomprehension that slowly transforms into recognition. "Who are you?" he asks in heavily accented English. The bearded figure in the center of the group straightens with dignity that transcends his ragged appearance. "My name is Shackleton." The words carry weight that seems to echo across the years of their ordeal. Ernest Shackleton, leader of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition, has returned from the dead to claim his men and complete their impossible story of survival. The rescue of the boat party from King Haakon Bay takes place immediately, with Worsley guiding the whaling vessel to their companion's location. Vincent, McNish, and McCarthy are lifted aboard the rescue ship, their part in the greatest small boat journey in maritime history finally complete. But 22 men still wait on Elephant Island, and their rescue proves far more difficult than anyone anticipates. Pack ice surrounds the island, preventing approach by conventional vessels. 3 separate rescue attempts fail, as ice conditions defeat even the most determined efforts. 4 months pass before the Chilean tug Yelcho finally breaks through the ice barrier surrounding Elephant Island. 22 men, reduced to eating seaweed and penguin bones, watch their salvation approach with emotions that transcend ordinary human experience. Frank Wild, who has maintained discipline and hope during 4 months of leadership under impossible conditions, prepares his men for evacuation with characteristic efficiency. They gather their few possessions and board the rescue vessel within an hour, leaving behind the desolate island that has been their home and prison. Not one man has been lost. 28 men who entered the Antarctic ice as members of a scientific expedition emerge as survivors of one of the most remarkable stories of human endurance ever recorded. Their ship is gone, their scientific objectives abandoned, their carefully laid plans reduced to nothing by forces beyond human control. But they have achieved something far greater than their original goals. They have demonstrated that human beings can endure circumstances that seem designed to destroy them. They have proven that courage, leadership, and unity can overcome obstacles that appear insurmountable. They have written a chapter in the book of human achievement that will inspire generations. The Endurance was crushed by ice and lost forever in the depths of the Weddell Sea. But the men who sailed in her proved that the human spirit possesses a strength that no natural force can break. Their story becomes legend, not because they succeeded in crossing Antarctica, but because they refused to surrender when success became impossible. They adapted their definition of victory to match their circumstances, transforming survival itself into triumph. In the annals of human exploration, the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition represents both failure and the ultimate success. They failed to accomplish their stated objectives, but succeeded in demonstrating something far more important: the indomitable nature of human courage, when tested by the very worst conditions imaginable. Ernest Shackleton never did cross the Antarctic continent. That achievement would wait for future generations with better equipment and more favorable circumstances. But he accomplished something that may be more significant. He led 27 men through an ordeal that revealed the very best qualities of human nature under the very worst conditions possible. Their names are written in the history of exploration, not as conquerors of geography, but as exemplars of the human capacity to endure, to hope, to maintain dignity and purpose when all rational reasons for hope have disappeared. The ice claimed their ship, the cold tested their bodies, the isolation challenged their minds, the circumstances pushed them beyond all normal limits of human endurance. But they emerged unbroken, united, and victorious in the most important sense possible. They survived with their humanity intact, their loyalty to each other stronger than ever, and their faith in the possibility of rescue justified by their refusal to surrender to despair. In the frozen wilderness of Antarctica, 28 men discovered truths about human courage that will inspire as long as people face seemingly impossible challenges. Their story proves that the greatest victories sometimes come not from achieving what we set out to do, but from refusing to be defeated by circumstances beyond our control. By endurance, they conquered not the continent they set out to cross, but something far more important. They conquered the fear, despair, and selfishness that could have destroyed them. In that conquest lies a victory that transcends any geographical achievement. The greatest survival story in human history ends not with the accomplishment of original objectives, but with the demonstration that human beings possess resources of courage and determination that can overcome any obstacle, survive any hardship, and maintain hope under conditions that would justify complete despair. Ernest Shackleton and the crew of the Endurance proved that by endurance, we conquer not just the external forces that challenge us, but the internal weaknesses that could destroy us. Their legacy lies not in the places they explored, but in the strength they discovered within themselves and each other when tested by circumstances that demanded the very best of human nature. Their ship was lost. Their mission failed. Their ordeal lasted nearly 2 years. But every man came home. And in that simple fact lies the most important truth their story has to teach: that human courage, properly led and collectively applied, can overcome any challenge that fate or nature chooses to impose. The Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition of 1914-1917 stands as the greatest survival story in human history, proving that by endurance we conquer not just the external forces that challenge us, but the internal weaknesses that could destroy us. Though they never crossed Antarctica, Shackleton and his men accomplished something far greater. They demonstrated the indomitable strength of the human spirit when tested by the very worst conditions imaginable.